Welcome everyone. My name is Dr. Charles Benight and welcome to the GRIT Resilience Coach Program, which basically GRIT stands for the Greater Resilience Intervention Team. We'll start out this morning, or this afternoon actually here, with introductions. And as I said, I'm Charles Benight, I go by Chip, and I'm the director of the National Institute for Human Resilience and a professor of psychology here at the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs. Joe?
Hello, everyone. I'm Joe Ruzek. I'm a clinical psychologist by training, and I've specialized in my career in post-traumatic stress and early intervention to prevent the development of problems after people experience trauma. I'm a longtime collaborator with Dr. Benight.
Hello, everyone. I am Nicole Weiss. I am a licensed professional counselor and licensed addictions counselor at the National Institute for Human Resilience. I am also our peer support program manager, and I have been running the GRIT program since we launched it in March of 2020, which seems like years ago at this point, but was only a few months ago.
Yeah. Okay.
And we represent the National Institute for Human Resilience. Chip, if you want to kind of give a little bit of a rundown of what our institute does.
Sure. The National Institute for Human Resilience was actually stood up kind of amazingly enough, at the same time that COVID was hitting the US, at least from our awareness of it back in March of 2020. The focus of the Institute is really around doing cross-disciplinary research related to resilience and human ability to respond to traumatic stress, as well as doing programming, community-based empowerment programming, which the GRIT program is part of that. We do also peer support programs for many organizations in the state. And then we also are supporting our PhD program here in clinical psychology through the Department of Psychology with a trauma emphasis. And then lastly, we have our own clinical operation focused on trauma recovery that we provide as well. So let me talk a little bit about the GRIT idea. So the GRIT idea came really as a function of thinking about what the pandemic was going to do as it spread across the world. And one of the things that came to me right away was that we really needed something that was going to be broad-based, that could really grab a hold of the strength within the community that we have, and to promote that strength and wellness throughout our community, rather than sort of waiting for the ramifications of the pandemic and then hoping that our systems that would be sort of downstream, if you will, would be available to help people who were really, really struggling. So the idea was in some ways prevention, and to get on the front end of that as much as possible. So in March of 2020, this concept of greater resilience intervention teams came to me, and luckily with Joe and Nicole's support and help, we were able to stand up this program within, I think, about 3 weeks initially, where we did our initial trainings at that point. But the idea is to really promote wellness and strength throughout the community by using people's natural helping relationships. And so the GRIT Resilience Coach Program, so we use the term coach for specific reasons, which we'll get into a lot more today. But the idea is that the pandemic is really a disaster, and it's a disaster that's unique in this context, because most disasters are limited in scope based on geographical location, floods, tornadoes, fires, and so forth. This one is obviously everywhere. And so this creates a unique challenge for communities to be able to respond. So in the time of a disaster, one of the things that the literature teaches us is that we want to strengthen coping as much as possible, the capacity to cope, to respond, to be resilient. But through that, by spreading support and providing resources for people, the idea is that we can kind of lift up or create greater resilience across an entire community or across the entire country. And so as a GRIT coach, if you obviously have been interested in doing this and you're now in the training, what the idea is that you can be a critical piece of that solution, and that you can actually strengthen the resilience and capacity for your community to be able to respond to the challenges that the pandemic is is giving us across the year here, and also for future disasters if that were to happen. So by doing this as a coach, you'll be spreading support across your social network, people you know and care about. So it's not like you have to go and talk to people you don't know. It's actually built because we want you to talk to people you do know. So next slide.
So as we get into this, just a few training logistics over the next 5 modules. We will include some self-reflections within the training, and there are a lot of self-reflections in your workbook. We really encourage you to use that workbook. Everything that's in our slides is absolutely in the workbook as well, plus more. So definitely check those out. And then as you work through those workbooks, there are, as I said, self-reflections for you to really kind of get into the grit training from your own perspective and what it can bring into your own life and into your own community. So we encourage those, and we will share our own self-reflections throughout this training as well. We also encourage you to practice the steps that we're going to talk about in the next several modules. We'll break this down into 5 pretty simple steps of making a great grit conversation. And we really encourage you to pause the videos, or after those videos finish, take some time, 5-10 minutes, to really reach out to somebody in your household or in your social connection and just let them know, hey, I'm just practicing how a conversation would sound. It can feel a little silly to do that, but what it's really doing is building on muscle memory and helping that conversation come out easier and in your own words. So we really encourage you to practice. There is also a quiz that is available at the end of this training. You can complete this quiz and attest to attending all 5 modules of the training, and you can receive a certificate of completion. If you would like that certificate customized for you, you can also send us an email and I will reply with a customized version of your certificate. We also have a feedback survey that we ask you to fill out at the end of the training, just to give us some information about how the training went for you. Is there anything we can continue to improve on, or are there any trainings in the future that you would be interested in? And then finally, we send out a weekly survey on Fridays just to check in with how many contacts you're making as a grit coach, how the week has been going for you, any questions you might have that we can answer, as well as how is your own coping and your own kind of self-care going. We just like to check in and provide any resources or support that we can.
Just a quick moment to say something about the purpose of grit. We realize that probably the primary way that all of us deal with all the difficult things in our lives is to give and get social support from others. We do that through what we might call natural helping conversations, where, you know, we talk to a good friend or a family member, and we get a little bit off of our chest, maybe we vent a little bit, maybe we ask questions, maybe we give each other some support or even advice. So the idea of grit here is to strengthen the natural helping conversations that you are having with the people that are already in your friendship and family network. Not only family members and friends, but neighbors, acquaintances, people you work with, essentially people you already have standing relationships, existing relationships with, and because that's where natural helping takes place. The concept here is that you will be providing support a little bit in a slightly different way. We hope slightly more effective, building on what you would ordinarily do. So just weaving in a few little different things into the conversations you might otherwise be happening. Although we hope you'll be a little more systematic about to touch base with people and sort of define your role in staying in contact with people as one that includes helping to support one another's emotional support. And this pandemic, COVID, as we all know, is morphing and changing in our experience. It's lasted a long while now. It's likely that it will last many, many more months. So we like to think of you as being a resource for those you love and those who are your friends in your community across the span of time that COVID is affecting us, even recognizing that the ways in which it's affecting us may be subtly or not so subtly changing across time. As Dr. Benight said, we also see you now as becoming, as holding the function as community resources. So even well beyond the COVID, it's possible that our communities may experience other disasters, fires, other kinds of natural disasters, or human-made catastrophes that might happen, and also all the more small-scale forms of stress and challenge that we all face in our lives. And we hope that you will see your role as a grit coach expanding beyond the pandemic itself, and then reaching out into the future for other difficult things that may affect ourselves and the people we care about.
So what is a grit coach specifically? So we use the term coach very deliberately here because what we're not doing is creating a mental health professional out of you with a 5-hour training. That's just not possible. But what we do want to do is capitalize on your, as Joe was just talking about, your existing relational skill that you use when you just reach out and care for people naturally anyway. But a grit coach's role is to support and motivate another person who may be struggling with a significant stressor or a disaster. So what we're really recommending then is just the ability to educate, to provide support, and to really think about helping that person with just the resources that you'll learn from this training specifically. So as you'll see as we go through the training over the next 5 hours, you'll be receiving real specific skills and real specific resources that, let's say you're talking to a good friend of yours and that person is really struggling. They're having a hard time. And you will have some tools on how to respond to that and how to help them be more efficacious, more empowered to respond to what's ever going on for them. So realistically, this is meant to help individuals, groups, and the community. But again, you're not meant after this training to be a mental health provider. So that's a real key difference. The one way we like to think about that is if an athlete is out on the field and sprains his or her ankle, a coach can help that athlete, get them on the bench, put some ice on it and so forth. But if an athlete actually breaks the ankle, then that's a different story. And that's when we would need a medical professional, or in this case, with what we're doing, a mental health professional. So we like to differentiate that coach versus professional.
So this is our first self-reflection. If you are following through in the workbook, this is on page 3. But our first question is simply, what types of qualities make up a good coach for you? And I think this is an important question because these are often the same kinds of qualities and abilities that we see in the grit coaches that have signed up for this training as well. And we see these as people who can really motivate their community. So when I look at this question, what types of qualities make up a good coach to me, I think back on my own high school days where I very reluctantly was a volleyball player. But my coach would really help motivate me and push me into it when I wasn't feeling it that day. She'd run next to me and say, we're doing this together. We're getting you in this. And it was that kind of willingness to run with me that really changed things around for me and helped push me forward. And that's something that I see in other good quality coaches of, if I'm telling you to do something, I'm showing you how I can do it too. That was a big standout for me. What about you, Chip? What are some of the qualities that make up a good coach for you?
So a great coach to me is a person that has a deep caring for other people. At the very core of what they're doing, whether they're an athletic coach or in this case, a support coach during a pandemic, the idea is that there's this core mission, if you will, to just be helpful and caring and compassionate about people they love, the people they really sort of associate with. So that's the kind of person, that we've all been around, where you walk down a hallway and they come to you and they say, hey, how you doing? And that person, when they say, how you doing, it's not like a lot of people where it's just perfunctory and you just walk on. It's like, I'm fine, how are you? And that's it. But they really want to know. And I think that core caring is a central part of a great coach. What about you, Joe?
Well, I would say, I would add to that. I always benefited from coaches that could help me see something new, help me recognize something that I could change in the way I was hitting a or I was, making a jump shot. That if I did it, I would be better at it. So that ability to help me see what it is I might want to do to improve how I'm dealing with things. And the other thing is that some coaches sort of make you believe in yourself. They make you think, well, maybe I could be first string, or I could be varsity, or I could compete. And that helping you see what's possible for yourself and pointing to your strengths, I think, is also a good quality of a coach.
Totally.
Very nice. So as you're watching this, go ahead and pause here, fill out the self-reflection, because it's a good thing to kind of ponder and ask about yourself. There's another question in there that talks about what kind of abilities do you feel yourself bringing into this kind of coaching program. And maybe those are very similar qualities. But think about it for a little bit. And then as you go through this module, maybe keep that in the back of your mind of, these are some good qualities that I can bring forward in these conversations. So when we're talking about who can benefit from this training, who would you want to reach out and help? There's really, as Joe has said too, there's really that focus on who's in your natural support network. And sometimes that network is a little bit bigger than we even realize it is, right? We have family, we have coworkers, sometimes we have neighbors, we have our social media connections, whoever that is for you. But it's looking at your natural support system and thinking who might be a little bit extra vulnerable right now, or who might be struggling a little bit with the stress of what's going on, whether that's COVID related or not. We're in a year where COVID has started a lot of stress for us, but there's been quite a buildup of stress in any other areas. Right now, there's a lot of people here working within the university who are working on the stress of what does remote learning look like, and how do we balance when we go back to school. So that can be some of the stress you might pinpoint as well. So while there's nobody in particular that we ask you to check in on, simply look at who's in your natural support network and think about who might need a little bit of extra support, or who could simply use a little bit of extra support. Sometimes it's not even identifying the people who need it, but it also might be identifying people that you haven't checked in on in a little while, or people who just kind of naturally come to your mind when you think of certain situations. So some of the ideas, however, of people who might need some extra support include family members who might seem recently withdrawn or seem to be isolating. I know our older adult community is in our hearts right now too, because they do tend to be a little bit more isolated. So that could be a population or somebody in your family that you might reach out to. It could be a friend who is showing signs of stress, such as feeling a little edgy, or they're just kind of out of sorts. They're not acting like themselves. Maybe they're not reaching out as often as they would be, or something's a little bit different in their, social media presenting, or just in your normal conversations, they just seem off. It could be a colleague from work who's not sleeping and seems really exhausted. I think with all the trainings we've done so far, across the board, sleep has been one of the biggest impact that people have had from stress. And so if you're noticing somebody who's not sleeping, or who just seems very tired all the time, that might be somebody to check in on. It could be somebody that you know who's working in a high stress or high impact job. These might be first responders, healthcare workers, small business owners, teachers. I think have one of the highest stress jobs right now, but somebody who has already had to take on a little bit of extra in the last recent months. It could be somebody who already has significant stress, such as a chronic illness or life transition, job change, divorce, death in the family, what have you. Or it could be somebody who's a single parent who's trying to manage having children at home and figure out their financial situations with this interesting stay-at-home requirement. And with some schools, that requirement might change very suddenly, where they've allowed kids to go back to school, and then within a day's notice, they have to shift back to remote learning. And that's quite a lot of pressure and stress on the family members of that child as well. So as you can hopefully see, nobody in particular, but people who you might notice are having a little bit extra strain, or who you notice might be having a little bit of extra responsibility right now. And simply checking in and saying, hey, I'm thinking about you, as you'll learn, has profound impact on some people. So as we get into the Grit Resilience Coach program course, some of our goals are to help you gain a basic understanding of resilience, common stress reactions in disaster and stress-related problems. We want to help you learn how to support and listen to someone who might be struggling with the pandemic experience or any other disaster or stress going on. Help understand how to build strength and resilience within individuals and families and throughout the community. So we really want to emphasize, while it's very important to talk about stress, it is just as, if not more important, to talk about resilience and strength as well. Help learn how to promote effective coping skills, a sense of self-efficacy, which is your confidence in your own ability to cope through a stressful situation, and resilience. Learn how to and when to make some referrals to formal mental health counseling when that might be needed, how and where to refer. And learn about available community resources and how to guide individuals to more resources when needed. And this is, again, where I'll refer back to our workbook, because we have packed that with as many resources as we could think of in the time. And we also will be having a newsletter that we'll send out every Monday with even more resources, because I think the more we share that, the more we educate everybody. And again, the more resilient we can become as a community.
So as we've said, the idea of grit coaching is to support you in holding natural helping conversations, and to think of some key ways, small ways that you can drop into what otherwise might be an ordinary friendly conversation with someone you know, to make you more effective in building resilience and strengthening the well-being of the person. So and I want to just very quickly highlight a few things for you to think about that we will be emphasizing as we actually go through the 5 steps of grit and we get into the nitty-gritty of the helping conversation. The first is that we want to encourage the person to talk a little bit about how they're coping with the stresses, and especially to talk about the emotional side of things. If they are experiencing distress, we'd like to have that talked about. And ordinarily, some people do that more than others. Some people are sort of tough guys that are not used to talking about their emotional feelings. Other people are more touchy-feely types and do it a lot. It's a good idea, however, to open up the topic, because it then gets it on the table and it enables us to have a conversation about it, normalize it, share some information, and then also talk about how we're dealing with it, what's working, what's good about what's happening, and what we can do to be more effective. And just to comment, one of the real ways that people are encouraged to open up and say a little bit about how they're feeling and what they're thinking is when we share a little bit of that ourselves. When we disclose, other people are empowered to disclose as well. So first one is that we want to, in these helping conversations, make sure to make an effort to encourage the person briefly to talk about how they're coping and how they're feeling with COVID or the other kinds of stresses that they're under. We don't need to force them to do it. We want it gentle, but we want it to happen. The second big thing we want to do is we don't want to just dwell on the ways in which this is messing with our head or making us feel bad. We also, all of us, are doing things to cope, and some of those things are working. And so it's easy when you're in the midst of when someone's feeling down or sad or unhappy to become preoccupied by the things that are going wrong. And one of the ways we can right that ship is by helping people to spend some mental time on the things that are actually going right, things that they're doing that are working for them. So the second big thing that we want to have happen in your helping conversations is that you help draw attention to the person about what they're doing that's working for them. The things, their strengths and the coping approaches, they may not call them coping approaches, but the things they're doing to keep themselves going and keeping themselves feeling strong or enjoying life. And so we want to ask them about those things. And you'll see when we get to the steps of grit, we actually give you language for how to ask questions to unlock that from them. We also, you know, when you ask people what they're doing that's been helping, they'll mention some activities they've been doing, and you'll have a chance to help them reflect on that, and by drawing attention to it in their minds, maybe strengthen that. But also in the conversation, we want to encourage you to maybe bring up one or two other kinds of activities that might be helpful, see if they're doing those. Nicole mentioned a moment ago the importance of sleep. So it might be that you choose to very briefly inquire, hey, are you sleeping well? It's, you know, a lot of people are having trouble sleeping. And then you can talk a little bit about what might help to make sleep improve. So we're also going to, as we review the things that are working, we're just going to open up the possibility that there might be other things that a person could do that would also help them cope well. And then a big role of the Grit Coach is to share resources. You know, there are a lot of community resources available in every community in America. Communities everywhere have been mobilizing. You know, there's community efficacy where people are pulling together. Nonprofit organizations, groups of volunteers, the institutions of our city life and our towns. People are doing things to help one another. Some of those are very formal, some are informal, but we want to share where resources are and let people know about helpful resources. And now, because we live in a connected world, there are a lot of technology-based resources. Those can be websites. Those can be apps that help people cope more effectively, calm their bodies, practice mindfulness, and so on. So we're going to be sharing technology-based resources as part of the Grit coaching role. And the big purpose of all of this is to get people up on their feet, coping actively. You know, when people cope actively, they feel more in control. Once they feel more in control, they feel better about themselves, they feel more hopeful about the world, and they're less stressed. And so a lot of Grit is all about helping people be just that little bit more active in how they're going about managing all the stresses and problems that are building up through the whole COVID experience. And so doing coping conversations are aimed in the end at helping people take a more active role in managing their own well-being and managing the well-being of the people they love.
And that leads us right into what are our 5 steps of Grit, and we'll break these down even more in the next several modules. But first, making connection is, of course, the first and foremost piece. And that might be a little bit of extra energy on your end to say, you know, hey, I want to check in with somebody I haven't heard from in a little while. Or again, it might simply be checking in with coworkers throughout your day or checking with your family at dinner time. So making connection with somebody. Asking questions, which seems easy, but there's a lot of different questions we could ask, and some are more helpful than others. So we'll break that down a little bit more into what types of helping questions you can ask. And then, as Joe just alluded to, talking about identifying coping strength and resilience. What's already going well, or what have you experienced in the past that you can take from and really apply to the current stress of what's going on. Sometimes it's really helpful to have that little bit of a reminder. And then adding to those strengths, whether it's things that are already going well and here's some new ideas, or, you know, here's things that maybe somebody is struggling with and some resources sent their way. And then reviewing, summarizing, discussing action steps, and providing some of those resources is our last step of Grit. As we get into kind of becoming a Grit coach, what your roles and expectations are, more or less it's up to you of how much you want to take this training and apply it into your life. But we do ask a few kind of ground expectations. First, we ask that you undertake the entire initial training, which is 5 entire modules. They are all broken down into these recorded videos, so you can take them at your own self-pace. We ask that you maintain ethical behavior and keep confidence and privacy. We'll go over that again in a minute, but that's really important to kind of the value of some of the conversations you might be having. We ask that you try to be knowledgeable about resources in the community, which just might simply mean keeping your ears open for what's around you. As I said, we'll send a newsletter with other resources. It might be apps that you're learning about, but simply being aware and knowledgeable, if you can, about what resources are available to you and your own specific community if necessary. We ask that you actively encourage others to participate in education and awareness programs directed towards physical and emotional fitness. This simply means that we encourage some of that active coping. We encourage others to really work on some of that coping themselves or get connected with resources in their own community. And then we simply ask that you abide by the spirit of a grit coach and promote resiliency throughout your community. I think we're in a time of unprecedented stress. Unprecedented seems to be the word of the year. But I also think we're in a very amazing time of spreading resilience. And I think if we can continue to ride that wave, we can really make a wonderful, resilient community in every community we're in. So going into a little bit deeper on that confidentiality, effective connection and support really relies on the sense of trust between individuals in that conversation. So when you're having some of these grit conversations or making some of those meaningful connections, just don't share that personal information with other people. It's really as simple as that. If it's information that if you yourself shared, you wouldn't want it told, don't tell other people, right? You can certainly tell people that you are having grit conversations, but don't use names when you can, or if it's not necessary, and don't share any personal information. It's just not necessary. And then try to have those conversations in private locations when possible. Avoid being overheard, and pay attention when that also includes a virtual environment, right? If you're on the phone with somebody, pay attention to who's around you and what kind of information is being shared out loud to make sure it can't be identified back to somebody. All right, and then as we said, we ask that you practice. Take time to practice the skills you're going to learn in this program. Practice those coping skills yourself, because hey, at the very least, you might get some benefit out of it too. Try out the resources we're going to send out. Those are going to be websites and apps, different podcasts you can listen to, things like that. But check them out yourself, because that way you yourself are knowledgeable and you might benefit from them yourself as well. So if you can, spend a moment now just thinking about who you can practice with. Maybe that's your family member, maybe that's your dog, doesn't matter, but who can you kind of have one of these practice conversations with to get it out of your mouth, to get some of that muscle memory going, and to build it into your natural communication style.
So as Nicole has been outlining for us, we're going to be training you in how to hold a slightly enhanced natural helping conversation. But we also want to talk a little bit about stress and also the core principles of disaster support. The principles are important because they're overarching guides for what we want to have happening within ourselves, with the people we know, and within our larger communities. And by having these principles in mind, you can sort of think creatively about how to better accomplish them, because there may be many different ways of accomplishing each of these principles. So we want to just take a moment to outline them, to think about them, and as general working principles that can guide not only your grit conversations that you have, but also looking around for other opportunities in the community to strengthen the community and build resilience. Here are the core principles. Back in 2007, a very large number of experts and researchers on psychological first aid, disaster, mental health, and resilience got together and pooled their ideas to come up with this list. And I'm going to spend a quick moment unpacking very briefly each of them, but they have to do with creating a psychological sense of safety, feeling safe in the world, building the ability of people to calm their bodies and minds, encouraging people to be connected with other people and reap the benefits of being supported by others, giving and getting support. Keeping and maintaining a sense of optimism, a hope that the future will be better as things get back to normal, and also building a sense of personal empowerment, what we call self and collective efficacy. The personal confidence that we can come through this, we can do things to care for ourselves and other people that will work and be effective for us. Next slide, please. So safety is kind of a basic one, right? When people are faced with a disaster, a fire, a flood, an earthquake, there's a great shattering of our assumption that the world's a safe place, that we're in a safe position. And when people are unsafe, that creates a lot of physical tension and anxiety, worry, fear, and that all of those feelings are difficult feelings that can turn into longer lasting distress. So COVID, as other disasters, does threaten the lives and livelihood of ourselves and our communities. And especially with all of the media coverage of it, it does threaten our sense of safety of the world and of our surroundings. So there are different kinds of safety here. Of course, the big one is personal and family health. Many people get infected with COVID, and unfortunately, many people in the United States and across the world have died of COVID. So it has a direct kind of threat to the safety of our own health and the health of our loved ones. Unfortunately, because of what it's meant for the economy of the United States and other places, it also interferes with our sense of financial safety. The fact that we'll be able to pay our bills and we'll be able to pay our rent and provide for our families. So financial issues are, refer to the loss of the sense of safety. Employment is also another aspect of feeling safe in the world. I have a job I do, I have a way I contribute, I have a set of activities that define me as a person and that pay the bills and make me safe in the world. So with the threats to unemployment comes a feeling of less safety. And because COVID is kind of an invisible thing that we can't wrap our minds around very well, and it's invisible droplets or aerosol particles that are floating around, and we can't really know when we are getting infected or when we're not getting infected. There's a kind of a big unknown factor of this, the kind of invisibility factor, and that plays out in terms of how's COVID going to affect our communities next? What's the next problem that's going to emerge? And that sense of the unknown and the unknowable also feeds into the sense of a lack of safety. So fortunately, there are a lot of things we can all do to feel more safe. A big one, of course, is to know how to practice actual safety behaviors in the middle of this epidemic. And by now, most of us have adopted these practices of physical distancing with people, of not having unnecessary social contacts, of wearing masks, all the different kinds of safety behaviors, going and getting tested if need be, and changing how we interact with our loved ones and our families to keep them safe. So that's very important. The engaging in safety behaviors also brings a psychological sense of increased safety. And by now, many of us are moving to the world, but feeling reasonably safe because we know what it is we're meant to do to keep ourselves safe. But safety is also a thing that's influenced in a lot of other ways. One is if we feel that we have support from others, that we have good relationships with others that are working for us, that other people are taking an interest in us, then that also makes us feel more safe. We feel safe when we're connected well with others and we're each looking out for each other. We also feel more safe when we realize there are things that we can do. There are places we can go to where people will help us. There's places we can get advice. There's places we can get some assistance for emergency shelter. There's people we can talk to for advice on, how to get unemployment paychecks. So our communities have resources. Knowing those resources are there and being able to access them and getting things back from them also improves our sense of psychological safety and reduces our sense of personal risk. And when we feel that we are coping effectively, that we know what to do to look after ourselves and our loved ones, when we feel that in our bones, we feel efficacious and empowered, then we don't feel as frightened. So we feel more safe when we feel we know how to cope and that we can do the things we need to do to take care of ourselves. And also, positive emotions are terribly important. One of the things that we do in these natural helping conversations, the grit coaching conversations, is we encourage people to participate in positive activities, because positive activities, whether they're fun activities, meaningful activities, ways we contribute, they lift our emotions. If we feel more positive emotions, we also feel more safe. So it's very important to continue to find ways to feel good across the days and in the face of the difficulties we face. Now, I also mentioned calming. Calming is the second principle, because stress of all kinds, and COVID stress, disaster stress, normal stress, and more extreme stress, all of them perturb our bodies and our minds. Our bodies are made for fight or flight reactions. So, all kinds of things are happening in our body when we feel under threat. And those can create problems for us, like headaches or indigestion or other physical problems that we're having. And also sense of mental calming, because we sometimes worry and find ourselves thinking about things relentlessly, being overwhelmed, or thinking too much about the fearful aspects of what are going on, and less about the things that are more normal and things we feel more in control of. So grit resilience coaches can do things in these helping conversations to help people have greater ability to calm their own minds and their bodies. And we do that by sharing resources, sharing tools, including apps and other tools that people can use. And being able to calm yourself, feeling empowered and able to do things to calm your body and your mind, well, those are part of being a resilient person. Calming is also increased by remembering that much of what we're experiencing, not everything, but much of it, is normal. If we are feeling fear, if we are feeling worrying about things, that it's normal. It's human to feel those things. Everyone else is going through those. It's to be expected. It's not a sign of mental weakness or mental illness. And to remember that much of our lives can be made normal now, and with the passage of time, things will become more and more normal. And so we help to strengthen a sense of personal calming by helping normalize what people are going through, and let them understand, let us all, we're all in this together, we're all experiencing many of the same things. Next slide, please. Yeah, and I've just said this, we're reminding others. Yeah.
We have a second self-reflection here. What are ways that you calm and relax yourself now? Does this look different during stress, and how so? Joe, I'll let you answer this one first. What does this one look like for you?
Big thing that I do is, well, number one, I'm a world champion sleeper. So I get plenty of sleep. If I'm tired, I lay down and take a nap. I'm retired. I have that opportunity. But also I maintain good sleeping hours, and I make sure I get rested. If for some reason I can't sleep, I make up for it. That's a big one. The other big one for me is I go for long walks. I find that calms me, especially if I could do it in a pretty place. But if I just do it around a neighborhood, that's great. I find it soothing. I think it also kind of relaxes my body, because it's good for my body, and by the time I'm done, my body's a little tired, and it brings calming in its wake.
I'm just like you there. I like to start and end my work day with a walk, walking my dogs. That's a big way that I kind of bring that natural calmness around. When I'm feeling really stressed, I have to make that more of a purposeful action, where I have to really make sure I have that allotted time, because I think stress can sometimes make us forget the things that actually help us. So that's something that I have to really take time out of my day, that, from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. before I start my work day, I'm going to walk my dogs. I'm going to get some of that fresh air. And then after my work day, I'm going to end it with a short walk as well. Chip, what about you? What are some ways that you calm yourself?
I think several ways, but I think two primary ones. One is exercise, like you guys are saying. I spend a lot of time running on trails and things like that, which allows my mind to just kind of disappear. And that's a wonderful experience when I can just be breathing the trees and the air and see the sky and so forth. So that's really helpful for me. When I'm stressed during that, I find it takes me a little longer to shut the brain down. And so I have to work hard at just kind of breathing and getting away from my thoughts. The other thing I do is connect with friends. And when I'm connecting with friends, I have a buddy I bicycle with on Fridays, and we've done it for over 20 years. And it's such a huge sort of normal activity for us that we use as a way to just decompress after the week. So that social connection there is extremely helpful for me. And stress makes that sometimes harder, because if we're both stressed, it sometimes can be less fun. And so we've had to recognize that over the years, and sometimes do a timeout, like, you know, let's not talk anymore about this or that, or work here and work there, and let's laugh a little bit. So I think that's a big thing when stress is sort of knocking at the door.
I think that's such a good point, because I think that tends to happen with a lot of our connections. I think Joe mentioned this earlier, is when we are feeling stressed, or when our community is feeling stressed, then anytime we get together, we tend to talk about the stress, and we get into this, what I call a negativity spiral. And sometimes we need to purposefully pull ourselves out about the good, what's been working well for you, what's been making you happy lately, and have some of those conversations, because they can really kind of reset our mind. I like that a lot. So,
Nicole, I just wanted to pick up on something important that I think you said too, which is, you know, when we are under stress, you know, events are getting on top of us. That's often the very time that we cut the positive things out of our life. They seem trivial, right? So maybe I don't make time for that walk, or maybe I don't make time for that bike ride, or I don't make time to call a friend, because it seems all of a sudden there's so much that's important on my plate that I let it go. And that's sort of one of the things that we don't want to have happen. Coping needs to become a little bit conscious, right? We need to kind of decide, well, we need to look after ourselves consciously, so we'll do these things. And a lot of times we'll feel like it, but sometimes we won't feel like it. And when we don't feel like it, might be especially the time we need to keep it in our habit routine.
absolutely. And this is why that self-reflection exists. So pause here and fill this one out for yourself, because what does it mean for you to feel calm and relaxed? And how does that look different when you're stressed? What might you need to do differently during those times to still get in some of that nice, relaxing calm that some of those habits might bring for you? So pause here, fill out that self-reflection if you can, and we'll go ahead and continue.
So returning for a moment to the principles of disaster mental health and the things that we want to focus on across all the things we do to build our own and others' resilience. The third one is connectedness. And you know, the very idea of grit coaching is really centered around connectedness, right? It's a helping conversation between you and the people that are our friends, neighbors, and loved ones. So grit is essentially harnessing and building and strengthening connectedness. And this is really important because, you know, in all different kinds of fields of research of how people respond to negative life events or stresses, a consistent finding is people who perceive themselves to have good social support come through not only wildfires or disasters, earthquakes or things like that. It's also the ordinary stressors of life, and such as divorce or recovering after surgery or recovering from a problem of addictions. Anything that is difficult, a person's going to come through it better if they feel that they have social support from other people. And there are reasons for this. I mean, one thing to point out is that social support is kind of a big term that includes a lot of things. So social support helps people in different ways. One is, as we've said earlier today, the communication of feelings is helpful. It sort of lets people get the feelings out, shine a little light on the feelings through conversation with others, put things in perspective, learn that other people might feel the same way. That's sort of emotional thing that helps through being connected with others. There's also giving of information, where I can go to do something, clarifying something that's been affecting me, learning more about a health condition, learning something different about COVID that's useful, or getting a new idea about where I can get some more recreational activities for my kids. But social support also involves problem solving. I talk about something that's bugging me or difficult or messing with my head. I get talking with someone else. They have ideas. They give me some ideas on things to do. So I might come away with a better idea about how to solve, or at least cut that problem down to size a little bit. And then also finding resources, right? You talk to other people about COVID, they're going to tell you things that they've been able to use to find help. So we all share resources that are helpful to one another. So when you have a helping conversation with another, some mix of all these different kinds of things may be happening. And that's what we call, social support. Feeling that the world is a place that is going to be getting better and the future is going to be good is very important. It helps us keep going. Humans are very resilient beings. Part of the human experience is to come up against all kinds of stressors, and indeed disasters happen to us all across a lifetime. But we as individuals, our families, our communities are incredibly resilient in the face of this. We probably have evolved to bounce back from difficulties and reshape the future to be what we need. So we know that inherently in all of us is the capacity for resilience. And so one of the things that we're doing in these conversations, and indeed connected with one another, is promote this belief that the future can get better, that things will work out, and to overcome the sense of helplessness or hopelessness that can sometimes set in when, in the early aftermath, when very, very bad things have happened to a person. Next slide, please. And all of this kind of sums up in the sense of self-efficacy or personal confidence that I can cope. If I think that I'm going to be able to come through this, everything else falls into place more. Things are stressful, but they're not overwhelmingly stressful. There are fears, but the fears don't throw me, off my stride completely. So we want to encourage people to know deep in themselves that they will be able to come through this, both as individuals, and we want to build the sense of our entire community in our towns and our cities and in the social groups that we hang with, that we're going to make it through this. We're going to make it through it as individuals. We're going to make it through this together. We're going to help each other, and together we're going to be strong, and we'll rise through all of this. So efficacy is a thing that improves in very specific ways. One is all of us have developed some degree of personal efficacy because of our past history. All of us have faced difficult things. And if we've faced difficult things and come through them, we've learned through deep, real personal experience that, we can prevail over obstacles and adversity. We can come out the other side. We may have had that experience of things looking really bleak and dark, and then we found out that if we persevered and hung in there, things worked out in the end. That gives you a feeling in your bones that you can survive and that you can cope. So one way is just that personal experience of coming through difficult times. Another one is watching other people. We learn about our worlds by watching other people. We see other people cope, and when we see people we know and care for cope with difficult situations, that gives us confidence that we too can hope. Maybe we have grandparents who lived through the world wars. Maybe our parents, had financial difficulties at different times in their lives. Maybe family members have overcome cancer, or come through difficult medical challenges, and they've come out the other side. We see other people cope. We see them live in a resilient way over time, and that gives us confidence that we too can do it. And You know, our friends are there to make us feel efficacious, to make us feel empowered. They show us that, you know what, you can do it. I have confidence in you. I've seen you. I know you. You're a strong person. There are a lot of things. Babies will change. You can do it. That helps build our sense of efficacy. And as we are able to cope with our own physical and mental tension, if we're able to ride our bike, go for our jog, walk, get on the Zoom and laugh with our friends, if we can practice meditation or relaxation and calm our bodies, if we see ourselves being able to manage our own distress, that gives us a sense of confidence in our ability to cope. So these are the ways that we build our sense of our own and our community efficacy. And yep, so again, take a look back at these principles, give some thought to them: safety, calming, connectedness and social support, hope for the future, and sense of personal confidence, self-efficacy, that I can cope and my community can cope. Those principles are things for you to be looking for ways to encourage in the helping conversations that you have. And maybe as you move through your community, you might find other ways to address these same principles and make them grow and make them more noticeable in your community.
That brings us to the end of Module 1. So we hope that you gained some helpful information in this first module. We're going to continue this conversation and dive into our grit steps in Module 2. So we will see you there. Thanks, everyone.